Hi, I'm Chris Carter, course developer and instructor at Point Blank. This tutorial gives you a flavour of what you can expect on our online courses. If you want to develop your music production skills further, head to Point Blank Music School to find out more about the courses we offer in London, Los Angeles, Ibiza, and online. Most people know that LFO stands for low frequency oscillator, but sometimes aren't completely clear what that means and what it's intended for. So that's something that we're going to answer in this video, and we're going to look at a couple of instruments, the first being ES2, which is a logic synth, and the second being massive. And different instruments have different combinations of LFOs. If we look at this particular instrument, we can see down the bottom half of the panel are modulation sources, and in this case we have LFO1, LFO2. We also have three envelopes, envelope 1, 2 and 3. So these are the modulation sources that instigate some kind of change of some aspect of the sound inside an instrument, and these can be assigned to, for instance, oscillators, to the waveforms, to the frequencies. They can be assigned to filter cutoffs, they can be assigned to volume levels, effect levels, and so on. So at the moment, when we're in a default state of an initialized patch, these modulation sources generally sit here not doing anything, waiting to be given some kind of job or role. In addition to these two low frequency oscillators, we have three regular oscillators here: oscillator 1, oscillator 2, oscillator 3. So what's the difference between a regular oscillator and a low frequency oscillator? There are two main differences. The first of those is the fact that the LFO is generally not routed directly to the amplifier. So what that means is we can't hear it. It's not an audio signal that we hear as a sound. Instead, it's a control signal which is designed to do something to another part of the instrument. The second main difference between an LFO and a regular oscillator is the fact that they happen at low frequencies. What exactly does that mean? Low frequencies are frequencies down the bottom end of the frequency spectrum in relation to our range of hearing. And if we look at an EQ plugin here, you can see we have 20 Hz down the bottom and 20 kHz up at the top. This is the range of frequencies that we can hear. So down the bottom here, 20 Hz or 20 cycles a second. So our ears are only sensitive to vibrations in the air which happen at that speed. That's the air vibrating backwards and forwards at 20 times a second. But air may be vibrating at lower frequencies or lower speeds. We just wouldn't be sensitive to it, and so we wouldn't be aware of it. But those frequencies exist. So for instance, a frequency of 10 Hz, that would obviously be considered a low frequency because we couldn't hear it. But it's quite possible that we would want to have a modulating speed of 10 Hz or 10 cycles a second. For instance, if we wanted to modulate the volume to produce a tremolo effect, we might want to do that at 10 times a second. Or if we wanted to modulate the frequency or pitch to produce a kind of vibrato effect, we might want to do that around 10 times a second. Or we might want an even lower frequency or slower oscillator, maybe as low as 1 time a second. So 1 Hz would obviously be a very low frequency. And so that's the other reason why we tend to refer to these control oscillators as low frequency oscillators, because they cycle at speeds which might be below the range of human hearing. Let's have a look at a couple of quick examples inside the ES2 and inside massive. Firstly, I'm going to take LFO1 and I'm going to assign that to the volume. So our target is going to be the amp, and the modulation source is going to be LFO1. And by increasing this slider gradually, we can hear the volume rising and falling. At the moment at a speed of just under 6 times a second. If I was to double click and type in 1, we have the volume rising and falling at a speed of 1 Hz or exactly once a second. Alternatively, I could send that LFO to a parameter such as the pitch of LFO1, still at a speed of once a second. The LFOs on the ES2 actually go relatively fast for low frequency oscillators, all the way up to the speed of 100 Hz. And by the time we get to that kind of speed, we can't actually hear the individual oscillations in the sound. It becomes a kind of blur. Once we go above about 16, it becomes part of the timbre of the sound. LFOs can also often be synchronized with the tempo of a host or sequencer. In this case, LFO1 doesn't do that, but LFO2 does. As you can see, I can either control the speed of LFO2 in hertz or cycles a second, or if I go below this DC line, I can now select note divisions. So for instance, a quarter note, and that would be LFO2 controlling, let's say, the amp with a metronome playing. You can hear that that's happening 4 times a bar or once every beat. And so how would we do the same thing inside massive? I'm going to close the ES2 and unmute massive and assign LFO5 to the amp. And you can see here we have the rate control. Which can also be synchronized to the tempo of the host by selecting a note division. In this case, that would be a 1/16 of a bar, or we could select a quarter note, or we could maybe select triplet values such as 3/16.